Okay. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Agile Shift session. Before we get started, I wanted to inform you about a feature in the presentation that'll make this session more interactive. Please take note of the question mark icon in the upper right of the presentation screen. If you click that icon, it'll open up the question and answer feature, which will allow you to send our moderator questions that'll be delivered to the presenter at the appropriate time. We are excited to welcome Ty Crockett. He is a director at Improving, and he's going to be sharing with us remote Scrum Mastery. How the heck do I do that? Ty, take it away.
Cool. Thank you guys for showing up for this particular talk. This is something that I think I struggled with when I first got into it, and so it seemed to be very, very relevant to do a talk about this in this moment right now. So I'll start off with a little bit more about me. These are some of the things I aspire to. Maybe I don't do them all well all the time, but these are some of the aspects of who I am. And so I got into this a long time ago. I guess I started doing Scrum back before it was a popular thing, even in software development. And back in the day, it was always, us and being physically located with a team. But over time, that's been a little bit different in the areas that we get into. We have a global economy with a global reach trying to touch spaces all over the place. And today, a lot of us are working from home, not just because of the way that the global economy works, but because of things that are happening inside our lives right now. So this is me. I'm a artist, but starving artist was a real thing. So I ended up working in technology and finally becoming a IT manager over a while, and then of course becoming a Scrum Master and starting to do this thing. I'm also a geek and a nerd. I don't know anything about sports. I don't go outside too much, which is kind of convenient right now. And then I have allergies, so I got the whole package that goes with that. I work for Improving, and this has been a beautiful life for me at this place, best place I've ever been. And I thank them for helping me really get good at the thing that I do. I want to start the talk, though, with making sure that, doing the Scrum Master thing somewhere else, we'll call it remotely, but just doing it from somewhere else, it doesn't matter about that piece as much as it matters that we keep our values forefront. And so the main thing about us is making sure that our values stay in the front of what we do. And Scrum has had values from the very beginning. These are the values. We want to make sure that that is the stuff that stays forefront. Scrum is cool. It is a magnificent system that we use to get some of our stuff done, but without its values, I don't think it's nearly as powerful. So I would also say that in working with remote teams or being remote myself, I'm always striving for this Agile principle. So while Scrum has values, we have the values of the Agile Manifesto and the principles that sit behind it. And this particular one, representing face-to-face conversation as being one of the best ways of doing this. I think this is one of the things that we're trying to achieve when we do this remote work. Alistair Coburn wrote this cool chart that I found, and I kind of redid it a little bit and kind of played around with it to make it look a little bit more up to date. And then I showed it to him, and he had me add some things to it. And so first, something I got from an architect that I worked with back in the day is face-to-face communication is really cool, but face-to-face at a whiteboard brings so many more valuable tools into play. Our visual learners get to talk about this kind of stuff, and things that are maybe too complex to describe in words, I can show you that picture, and then we can touch it and play with it and move it around. So face-to-face at a whiteboard was really beautiful. We're trying to go for the most high bandwidth form of communication we possibly can. So face-to-face at a whiteboard, but then face-to-face, then maybe video is it, like what we're doing right now. Maybe that's the next place. And then everything that we get to below this is where I think me and my kids get into conflict at. Is it a phone call? That's the next best way of doing it. Do you guys even still have phones that look like that? Is it text, which my kids put at the very front of the line? That's the best and most solid form of communication. Is it an email, Well, I don't know that if I was looking at a large code base that I would want to do that on a whiteboard or talk about it face to face. Maybe I would send the snippets of code back and forth. Is it literally writing a letter and sending it via postal mail? Like, is that the way to do it? I know that I get that heart moment when people do that. For me, I got one just a few days ago from a friend, and that was really, really cool. I don't think that could be replaced by a text. Is it the electronic document that we haven't deleted one of those things in years? And then the one that Alistair told me to make sure I add back in there is, don't forget, the most lonely thing is that paper document that we either printed out or wrote on, and we put in a file cabinet, sitting there waiting for somebody, please come and read me. Yeah, that thing. And so we're just trying to go for our best form of communication. So I've kind of put this into these 4 areas: people, logistics, technology, and then the events that might happen around it. When I'm saying events, I'm talking about Scrum events. Like, what are those particular events? Because we are going to keep this around Scrum and the Scrum Master, but here's some of the spaces that might happen. And so what I've noticed is that when we were face-to-face, we valued frequent check-ins. It gave us an opportunity to course correct. It made sure we were on the same page. It just connected us as humans. As soon as we remove our face-to-face nature, where body language, tension, and all that stuff is so apparent and visible, I think the frequency of our check-ins needs to rise to compensate for that. And so there's something around this. Now, what's that answer? I don't know. I think that is up to a Scrum team. And I'm not saying a Scrum Master, I'm saying a Scrum team. We don't get to rule this, but we can help to make sure we ask the right questions and get in the right space for this. As soon as possible, have a retrospective about how things are going. You do not have to wait to the end of the sprint to have a retrospective. You need to have a retrospective by the end of your sprint. And Scrum doesn't say you have to just have one. And so I think when things are in a bit more of a chaotic state, or things are becoming more complex, it's part of the check more often piece. So maybe do that more times. And man, this is a spot where our facilitation skills can come in so clutch, and we want to go and help our teams. We want to be there for them. We want to make sure that we are serving them, and all of a sudden we found out we're inflicting ourselves upon them, and they have no ability to focus, and you're always in their face. Don't be that Scrum Master. And so also look for those non-verbal feedback moments. This is a spot where video kind of helps that, because I know they're saying you're being cool, but their teeth are gritted and their lips are pursed. Maybe it's not cool. And maybe not everyone has learned how to handle confrontation, or learned how to handle conflict in such a way that they're willing to tell you in a way that works, especially if you're a new team, or you're that new Scrum Master, or your trust levels aren't up there. So I think about those things. Something that a friend of mine, Kid Howard, introduced to me is something called VARK, and it's about learning styles: visual, auditory, read, write, and kinesthetic learners. And I am very much a visual and a kinesthetic learner, but I also notice it starts to help in just simple communication, because we're learning about each other every time that we have a conversation with each other. And so I create spaces that allow these things to come to play. Maybe it's in some of the tools that I use. Maybe it's in the fact that we're doing audio, we're doing video. You'll notice I'm standing here and you can see me move so much, and I can get up here when I need to have that part of the conversation, and I can be back here and be kind of cool. That is something that I leverage in my communication with my people, and I think they should leverage it too if they feel that that's the right thing to do. We should create a space for introverts and extroverts. Here's this crazy thing: whenever I go to work with an organization, they tell me about these spaces that they're building, these new Agile spaces where you get a table, and you don't even have to have offices and desks anymore. We just get this table, we stick everybody at the table, and they're all in each other's face, and it's so much more compact. It's such a win. Wow. For extroverts, they're like, this is really cool for a little bit. But then I noticed I couldn't put a picture of my family anywhere. I noticed I don't have any space for myself. And it's not like I'm here. It's like I'm visiting this place. And it's not really built for me. And so we start forgetting about who our spaces are for. We don't have spaces to escape to. We don't have spaces for focus. We lose those things that are really valuable to us. We actually don't even embrace our values. And so this becomes a really important thing for us to consider, both of these types of communication and types of interaction. And then there needs to be space to collaborate, sure. There needs to be space to go and be contemplative too. We need to create those type of spaces. And in the virtual world, I know that it's great. We have video on 24/7. Like that's maybe a bit much. Maybe some people dig it, but maybe everybody doesn't. And you need to just create space that allows them to do this. And I separate these two things, privacy and confidentiality. Privacy is just like give them their space just to be theirs. Also respect people's space and respect people's information. But then confidentiality, you have these multiple levels and sometimes a conflict. I know I'm hired by an organization, and so I have a confidentiality that exists with them, and I have a job that I need to do. I have a one-to-one relationship with the next human, and there's a confidentiality that exists between us, and those things may conflict. And then I have one to the team. In all these different relationships, that's really complex and hard to manage. And how do I deal with these systems, these dynamics as they butt up against each other? And so this becomes part of our struggle as when we're dealing with people. I want to make sure that I remind you guys, throw in questions, get us prepped for some of those things. We're going to take those things at the end, but please start creating them and get them lined up for us. All right, now all of this stuff, you don't have to solve this by yourself. You hired the most intelligent people that you could get your hands on. You stole them from your competitors. You do anything you could to attract these people. We believe that they're powerful enough to solve those problems. They keep the company running. For sure, they can solve the problems that sit before them. So we use these Scrum Master superpowers. These are the two, and I swear that these have been the keys to my success, and I think that I've been a pretty good Scrum Master. One, take it to the team. Like whatever that problem is, I don't have to solve this thing alone. I have an entire team of systems thinkers that can help me figure this out. So I take it to the team. And every time that you do this, you're something other because you're a Scrum Master. You literally have Master in your name. And so if that's the case, and they want to give it back to you because they've never dealt with anything like this before, they don't know how they're going to handle this, I got one more play for you, and it's to ask them to do the very best that they can. That's the most you could possibly ask of them. And so that's it. All I want all the time is the very best that you have. It's so much more than, hey, can you give me a minimal set of things within a certain specific time box, as we used to do? All right, so let's get into the logistics of it. I think about like group sizes. When it comes to this, like, man, dealing with a large group at one time, Scrum already says, well, hey, we suggest you use a team size of, at least a development team size of like 3 to 9. That sounds like that works pretty well. But even when you start talking about breakouts and the group sizes there, this is the thing where I take a note from the video game industry. Whenever I play a game, the most people I usually see in a group inside a video game is like 4. But guess what? They're doing the kind of stuff that we're doing. They're online, collaborating to do some complex task that requires a lot of teamwork. So that 4, and I would say 3 to 5 is the number that I see most often. And that 3 to 5 thing is kind of how stuff breaks out, where communication doesn't become too complex. And so I think about that whenever we go to do breakout work or any of that kind of stuff. And if you use like tools that have virtual breakout rooms, then that will be about the size of the groups that I would break people out into. And when it comes to like us having these conversations, even with a small team, man, the sound and space inside a physical environment is different than it is when we start to do this in a virtual space. When we're doing it in a virtual space, everyone has equal presence in sound, as opposed to the conversation that's happening over there that sounds distant and far away. And this one that's right here with us that's very near. Everybody has equal space. So when 2 people start talking, then it just sounds like a muddle of words. When 5 people start talking, it's just noise. It's hard to get anything out of that. And so finding some way that that works, and I'm not saying be all like, Robert's Rules of Order on how we're going to deal with this. I'm saying find some way, and this is another one, use our superpowers, take it to the team on how you're going to deal with these types of issues. And then finally, I throw in a thing at the very beginning of any event. Here's where we're going to muster if things go bad. The muster point, where do we go when things fail? And so if everything falls apart, we're going to go check our email and we'll see where we get together again next. If everything falls apart, all of our technology fails, something happens, we lose connection, we're going to go to this space, and it's a wiki page that we have that shows us what we should do next. Like, get that muster point available to each other. We're going to send a text to the group, whatever the case may be. Make sure you have that muster point as a backup and failure space. And then when it comes to facilitation, I've kind of started to rename this Remote Scrum Mastery and Facilitation, because it's really about the facilitation when it comes to this. What's I see the heavier work here. So as a facilitator, before we get started, summarize the tools. What did you do last time? Summarize what that looks like. Tell us what the big picture is. What's our mission? What's our goal? What's the visionary concept that we should be working on? And make sure that people know every time that you're late, we have to re-explain everything to you, and we hold everybody up. And make sure people understand what's at risk there when they do that, or what they're inflicting upon other people. Discuss what breaks look like, and I think breaks need to be more frequent in this virtual space. Now we've started to talk about this online struggle that we end up having, where we're starting to not be able to tolerate it as much all day long, all the time. So this is starting to hurt us a little bit. So maybe more frequent breaks to give people a chance to detox. Maybe they're short, but just frequent. And here's one that I struggle with personally as a facilitator. We let people go and break out in these spaces and rooms, and when they're physically with me, I can see what's happening in the room. I can feel the tension and the energy. I can see when there's conflict, or when somebody's maybe being like overbearing to another human. But man, in a breakout room, I can't. And so, how do I do my job as a facilitator and like managing the space there? This is a spot where you're going to have to ask for help from the group. They're going to have to be more vocal about these things. We will have to check in more often. You might have to float, and you might need a second person to help you with some of these things sometimes. So look to your team to help you in that space. When it comes to the technology itself, this picture right here. This is my physical setup. I thought before this happened, when I was doing work, man, 2 screens is like a must. Now, like, I'm kind of become dependent on 3 screens, and I even use my iPad over to the left. You can see there, because I'm always drawing and stuff like that on it. From my background and being an artist, and I find that if I draw something out, I think in pictures, it's just so easy for me to communicate that with people. So I use tools that allow me to draw on them, and I have it physically sitting here as a space. And then when I'm done, I can send it to people because it's electronic. So that works out really well for me. But I use these multiple spaces to see. I try to keep my space something that keeps me upbeat and going. I don't want to have too much junk on it. And so this happens. Sometimes I'll use my phone as like, this is a text thing, or if I need a back channel to somebody on some subject, I might use my phone as the back channel and text. And so I have all these tools here sitting in front of me. And you can see I say like 2+ monitors makes life easier. And I think of it like this. My video sits right here. I'm with you guys. My collaboration tool sits right here. And if I have that third one, you can see like all the other stuff, mail, Slack, all that stuff ends up, Teams, all that ends up sitting over there, where every so often I'm going to go look at that and see if there's something I need to reply to. But my thing of focus, I want to do that as infrequently as I can. So sometimes when it comes to like even doing video, people are like, why don't I have a camera on my computer? Most smartphones do. And this cool little stand that my son showed me, I got on Amazon, and I use this little thing to be able to hold my phone on. And so he was watching like YouTube at the dinner table, and so I kind of got his idea and I started putting that there. And so in the case that I can't use my computer, I can use my phone to do video. Like there's just all these options that sit in front of me that I don't think were available to us as much years ago. And so another thing is you don't have to use all of the technology. Oh my goodness, I got it at my fingertips. So I have to find a way to make use of everything every time. And that is a crazy maker. So don't do that thing either. As a matter of fact, if you don't have to, don't. Just do things as are convenient, as they make sense. And check with your people to see if this is helping or hurting. I put more tools. If you got more of those things, every single one we have to learn. Then we got to know which one are we in right now? What are we talking about? Which one are we switching to? And that starts to get really nuts. And if you're going to give people tools, make sure they have early access to them to be able to use them and understand them a little bit more before you go and start to do the work, or before you go in and dive into whatever your mission is. Just let them go and touch that kind of stuff. And so for you yourself as a Scrum Master, if you're going to be using these tools or introducing them to your groups and to your teams, make sure that you become familiar with them yourself. I always, much to the pain of my family, find a way to do a home project in one of the tools that we might use to do work projects in, or do work towards our products in. I go get the free version of it, the temporary version of it, and I go and do something at home in it. So it gives me the ability to go and test these things out and use them and actually come upon some of the problems as I go and address work myself. Now, like I said, my family has been the victim of those experiments, and they know more Agile products than I think most Agilists do. All right, so then there's ad hoc stuff. Oh my goodness. And ad hoc comes in both good and bad. So ad hoc is in, hey, this problem just arose and we don't have a solution for it. That may be something that you just have to deal with. And one of the first things I do is I ask for a little bit of grace in this moment where we're new to this. And if you are new to this, just say it, just make it clear. It makes it so much easier, and people are so forgiving when it comes to that kind of thing. And just make it clear, lay it out there. In a lot of mine, I have a grandson who runs around here. He's not here right now, but I'm like, hey, you might hear that. And I hear people saying, well, you might hear my dogs, you might hear my kids, you might hear my loved one, whatever the case may be. That might be in the background, and people are kind of understanding about it. People just don't. It doesn't bother them so much anymore. Everybody doesn't have fantastic tech at home, and everybody doesn't get to take their work computer home. And sometimes when they do get to take their work computer home, it's crap. So they might have bad tech or a bad internet connection, whatever the case may be. So how do you start dealing with what that looks like? And if you know beforehand, then you can start to make some type of concession for it. You might run it lower video or something like that, or just not. And now we've taken another step down to the left when it comes to the bandwidth of communication. So how do you deal with that kind of stuff? Sometimes you drop. And then if you do, what should your group do? And so how do you deal with these type of things? Once again, I'm going to use my superpowers. I'm going to take it to my team and talk about these things and what do they want to do in these situations. Sometimes you might have to make the technology decision. As a Scrum Master, we want to create this environment where people can be successful. Your organization may grant you the authority to make that environment, which is really beautiful. And if that's the case, then you start looking at these things. You can see, like I've examined some products with our leaders, and then we talked about, well, okay, what does this and what does this and what does this thing really well? So it's not just the features that they have. And let me just go ahead and say, breakout rooms, need them, love them, love them, love them. So get that one. But what are the costs associated with doing this? Is that free? Okay, if it's free, then what do they want from me? Like that becomes part of the question, right? And then the licensing models that have to happen here. So how does that work? Is it one where it's the whole office and their models like really for the long term, or is it like for specific events? How many people can you let in? Can you invite people from the outside to come and join you? You have vendors that are associated with this? These are all things that we have to start thinking about when we're making these technology decisions, and these parts become headaches. All right, finally, here we are related to Scrum itself, and like how does it work with Scrum? And how do the events work? So if there's pre-work associated with this, if there's things that people need to do, make sure that they know beforehand so they can come prepared and you can get right into what the event is. And I'm not talking about pre-work for Scrum, we don't do. I'm talking about pre-work to just get your setup for actually having a conversation with each other. What do they need to do to get ready? If it's something like that, I might send it out a week ahead of time. I might create a space for them to go in and play with it just to get familiar with our tools or whatever we're going to be using. After the event, do you just send an email saying, hey, here's the summary of stuff, here's the tools that we use, here's where you get access to the content that we created afterwards, because we're not in the physical world where people can just go pick it up off of a desk. What does that look like? And then these are the things that I think have saved me most recently. Reducing my language to very clear directions. Hey, don't forget this thing is in the top right corner. This is in the bottom right corner. Oh, it's in the center of the screen. It's at the very top. And the icon looks like this. And I've described something that everybody's very familiar with. Especially if you're working with a global group, don't assume that they understand your localized English or Spanish or whatever language you speak. Do something that is globally accessible when we're talking about that, the simple and clear directions. And then repeating yourself is not a bad thing. Like the first 5 times that you go to this area, that particular thing is in the upper right-hand corner. The icon looks like this. The upper right-hand corner, the icon looks like this. Don't make things go through you. Many people can help. Here's one of the craziest things I watch. Daily scrums happen, and the Scrum Master is the only person who can log on to some video conferencing tool, and so everybody has to wait. And if they're not there, then it doesn't happen. That's crazy, and you should not be a bottleneck for things that need to happen for your teams. And we've already talked about let the systems thinkers do what they do. You have a whole team of them. How do you leverage them? And so that stuff's all the basics. All that stuff about facilitation, that's all the basics. And there's some parts that make things a little bit different. I've tried to draw these like bubbles out to make it seem like here's the things that might be the most impacted by. And so sprint planning, a lot of people were doing sprint planning using tools anyway. So the thing that I might have done back in the day, these few things that happen in a sprint planning, like going and checking those, putting them up on a big sheet of paper, putting post-its on the wall. Can you get a tool that does this? One of my favorites has been the tool Mural, M-U-R-A-L. It's been a really, really awesome one. And we've just been able to replicate anything that happens on a whiteboard in that tool. There's a few others that are really close to it. Miro, I've always dug Trello. There's just so many different tools. I don't advocate for any particular one of them. I've just been using some more than others, especially if they allow me to draw on them. And so I can create content and then start working on it in that space. So here's the deal. I always grew up in this world saying the best multi-user interface is a whiteboard. And I still believe that's true. This is something my mentor taught me, and they were really on target. But what I noticed was when we got about 6 people all really crunched in together, that's maybe a bit overly cozy. And so we are in a space where maybe we have like 10 people that need to have access to something. And when we start using these boards, they get into the space where these things have a lot of touches at once. And I watch chaotic collaboration happen in ways that I think are really awesome with these multi-user interfaces that are boards. So that might be a tool that I use in this space. But other than that, I think that sprint planning ends up kind of being the same way. It's the over-talking might be the hardest part, but most of that's the team's work to get their stuff done. All right, so the daily Scrum, I don't know that much has changed here, especially as a Scrum Master, your responsibilities will be lighter, but it feels the same that once we've dealt with those basics, this one's kind of the remote aspect of it is not the impact. I think the over talking each other might be a really weird space. If there's anything, I always ask this, and this was in person and it's a virtual world. What are we optimizing for? If I see people go around and they're doing that thing where they're saying, okay, here's what I did, here's what I plan on doing, here's what's blocking me. I found that I'm kind of hearing we're optimizing for their time as opposed to, are we optimizing for the work or the product or the value that we're trying to create, because then that will be the subject and center point of what we're talking about. Are we optimizing for the most important thing or the highest value thing to get done? Then that will be the focus of our conversation. So I might start asking that kind of question, but that's going to be whether they're in person or not. I found that the sprint review is one that maybe was a bit more impacted because the use of tools becomes a little bit different here. You can see something that we put up to like start talking about value metrics in here, especially if you're doing like analytics and stuff like that. This starts to become a lot cooler because everybody can see whatever the dashboard that you use or something like that. And can we make new decisions with this? We're all coming into it in different places. Can we look at the product backlog, touch it? Can people independently go and touch and look at things? Like this becomes another tool to go, another way to leverage some tools that are really, really cool. Whatever we do, I'm asking people, Scrum Masters, a lot to find ways to free the product owner up to interact with their stakeholders. Don't make them a person who's doing a tremendous amount of administrative work during the sprint review. Let them interact with the stakeholders during the sprint review. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. I think you have to go back and take this to the team, and I mean the whole Scrum team again, to see what can we do to free the product owner up in that space. Anybody can write the new user story. Anyone can write a note. Anyone can take notes. So it starts to get into this space. Now, a retrospective, man, this one's really tough because even when we were face to face and there was that one person who was on the phone and they had to speak out into a speakerphone to other people, that is a hard space to be in. Now we're talking about everybody's remote. Hey, are you recording this? If I type something, where does it go? Who sees it? What happens to that? This becomes a really weird space when we talk about safety. So number one thing, safety first. Vegas rules is number two. Some of you guys who are listening to this might know the story around, I've only heard of one hated Scrum Master. And that hated Scrum Master was a person who betrayed their team's trust by taking notes of every one of their retrospective and taking it to their boss's boss's boss. And then when that all came down, the boss was like, I know this stuff is true because the Scrum Master's been telling me. And the team was no longer like beat down because their boss was yelling at them. They were devastated by the arch betrayal of the person whose one job was to protect them. So this is a really touchy area. And I don't think much has changed in the way that you facilitate, besides the fact that the virtual world makes it a lot less safe. And it's our job to bring that safety back. We're going to need to do that in conjunction with our teams. There's a ton of tools in this space to go do this. There's a ton of retrospectives that apply to this. Tasty Cupcakes is the largest Agile Games website on the net. And I gotta say, what I notice is today, there are a ton of new online and virtual games for people to go use because that's what's hot right now. So go and check that out and see if you see something you like. Now, after going through all this stuff, we start talking about this role, and oh my goodness, the Scrum Master is a really big job. And you got all these skills, all these tools in your tool belt. The question is, when should you use them? And when shouldn't you use them? And so just because you have it doesn't mean you have to use it, but you got everything that it takes. And if you don't, you got some space to go work on it. All this stuff is free. Scrum is free. There's so much knowledge that exists out there that I think you can get what you need. As a matter of fact, we offer some more stuff. So this is just one of our talks in this space. There are so many more that we have. If you go to improving.com and virtual-events, you'll get to check out some of these other talks that are here. This particular one is on the Scrum Master, but if I talk about what the other side of it is, it's Don's talk on remote product ownership. He calls his steering the ship from afar, which sounds so much more, I don't know, regal than mine does. But this will be the other talk that's the other side of this, and you guys should check this one out. I think I'm in a good space to stop and take some questions. I'm Ty Crockett, and it's been awesome to hear you to deliver this to you guys. And please contact me afterwards. Let's see if we can get some questions going on.
Yeah, Ty, we've got a few questions and actually some comments with some questions to follow up the comments. So
Okay.
we'll get to a couple of them. One of them kind of goes back, Carl was asking, how do you create space for those introverts and extroverts virtually? Do you have some examples or some ideas that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think of number one, I'm going to start with the introverts thing, the thing that I struggle with myself the most. Because obviously, or maybe it's not obvious, but I'm an extreme, maybe unhealthy extrovert. I'm on the extreme side of extrovert. But what I've learned through a ton of introvert friends, or some things that I've learned over time, is one, introvert doesn't mean that you don't like people. Introvert means that it might take a little bit more energy for you to deal with large groups and intense amounts of this interaction and even stuff that's happening in the atmosphere and around you. So can we create some small spaces? And I mean, and so how I create small spaces. One-to-one conversations aren't nearly as taxing. It's not something to do all the time, but one-to-ones are really nice. And can we set these kind of spaces up? And can I just give them contemplative in alone time, just so that they can exist and do their thing? This has been my thing to be a listener more so, and I think that's a skill to practice. I always tell Scrum Masters, hey, can you sit on your hands? Like, just don't do anything. Just be there and listen and be in the moment, be mindful, be with them is the space. Now, on the other side with my extrovert people, I find that I don't have to try as much when it comes to try to create a space for them. Especially in this moment right now, during this time period, there's so many things that we do. Hey, let's have a virtual happy hour. Hey, let's have a virtual coffee moment. Hey, let's have a virtual lunch, virtual meet and greet. We end up doing all these things, virtual lunches. We're doing so much stuff in the space to support the groups getting back together that I think that one's not as much of a problem. But just letting the space be and letting things be a little bit calmer and a little bit more individual and meaningful is the way that I might deal with the introvert-extrovert piece.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so we got another one. Stephen kind of made a comment, and I think that was pretty neat. And it was, remote work kind of gives you much more of the ability to specialize people's days. As someone that leaves for an hour at 3 to get kids, someone doesn't start until noon, and fourth, generally within the context of having at least 4 hours of team overlap, much more freedom. We have much more freedom when we are remote. What's the ideal work from home going to be like for each person? Then look for ways to make the best for everyone. So I think he's just saying, what's the best work from home kind of look like?
Yeah, I have, my thing on that is I get up really early, and I love the fact, and that's where my energy is. I want to do stuff in the morning, and I'm wanting to send my coworkers texts and stuff. I'm like, it's 4 o'clock, and that will probably not make them happy. So I'll hold that stuff off, but I'm in this presence of mind state really early. And so here's what I think is the thing, and I don't know, we will see what happens. Here's what I think is the thing. So many groups that have tried to do this already, they would have those like, okay, we just care about these core hours, that thing, right? Because we still want the collaboration space. That is our competitive advantage, the fact that we can do better things together than we could as individuals. So we still want the collaboration space, but the core hours were so, they were kind of put on us by leadership, and they were decided by other people. But maybe in this new space, whatever that team is that has to interact together, maybe that's who talks about what core hours look like and how many core hours do you need. Now, if there's a trust breach, we're not talking about Scrum anymore. We're talking about, I don't trust you to do right by what you said you were going to. I feel like I'm paying you and you're not doing what you said you were going to do. Now we're not talking about Scrum anymore. We're talking about the trust problem. Let's deal with the trust problem as a trust issue and talk about it around trust. But if we do trust our people, then maybe they create what their core time needs to be, so there is collaboration, there's overlap. And then outside of that, get the job done and do what's best for you. And that creates that's another way to create that space too. Love that statement, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a good one that kind of goes somewhat along with that. I think that you can kind of segue to, which is, Evo's asking, how do you get people to use their cameras more now that we are in this remote environment?
I have a couple. One is, before we get into the events themselves, I end up having this discussion with it. If it's a thing where this is the difference between me as a facilitator and me as a Scrum Master, and I think these things sometimes depart from a little bit from each other. As a facilitator, I will tell people the expectation for this particular event is that we will have video running for the duration. If you need to turn it off for whatever reason it is, I don't need to know that. And if you want to turn it off for a little bit and then go do whatever it is and then come back and turn it back on, fantastic. But I want to set an expectation that this is the way that the meeting will be run. And so therefore, I'm stating this is what the bounds of this particular environment looks like. And so that's easy. But when you talk about being a Scrum Master, now it isn't that I get to dictate this is how it's going to be run. It's going to be like, hey, this isn't just mine. I am a participant that doesn't have more say than any other individual. Now, what's the best thing for us as a team? And this is now, I'm going to go back to my values thing. Like, let's talk about our values, and if we value focus, if this helps in this space, can it help us with our transparency is something that we see as a pillar for empiricism. And so we start to get into this space, and we're having conversations, but you know what? That group has to make that choice. And then the crazy part is that every individual in the group has to make a choice. Now, if the individuals are conflicted on this thing, and some people are super adamant about they have to do it, then we start with it. This is another conversation. Scrum's not the thing anymore. Now we're talking about how much rights we believe we have over the next human, and we start talking about that kind of conversation.
Absolutely. So I just want to make Dennis threw a comment out there that said, Azure DevOps, formerly VSTS, has a great retrospective feature that works well remotely. Just a kind of tip out there, I guess, for people that have Azure.
I want to behind that. So when you guys use the online tools, a lot of times they have other people have access to that content after the fact. And I'm going to go back to safety, is that make sure that, one, the conversation's had beforehand with the Scrum team on what happens to this stuff after you finish. In a physical one, I take these Post-its and I trash them because that's no longer valuable anymore. What we're going to do about it is, and that goes into our sprint backlog. But in that virtual world where we don't delete anything and we never have, that now, okay, well, what happens to that data? Have a discussion with the team beforehand, keep that commitment afterwards, right?
Absolutely. So we had another kind of comment that you may be able to add some more to here, Ty, that says 15 minutes near the end of the day retrospectives worked well. Often after retro, social conversations were more important and replacing the water cooler talk and maintaining social correctiveness. Scrum Masters can thoughtfully create places for non-work social correctness time within the day. And for instance, having them introduce their pets or their kids or spouse, or give them a house tour or show a car, or what are your hobbies, things like that.
I can't add to that. That's beautiful. That's awesome. I think that is amazing. And the more and more I interact with other people, so I'm a trainer, I'm a professional Scrum trainer also. And the more and more I get to interact with people, I watch people bring this up, and they're doing this in my classes and stuff. So I'm getting to see a bigger breadth of people who do this for a living. And this is the stuff that I'm seeing, and it's joyous and it's awesome. And this thing starts to make us a team. Not just a bunch of people working on the same thing, but an actual team. Those are that's like the lifeblood of it. So I can't add to it.
Awesome. So Brentley asked a question, and kind of a combo, but he said dealing with asynchronous information is tough, like drive-bys, face-to-face conversations, etc. What are some tips and tricks for teams that are both on-site and remote?
Let me hit this in two ways because I want a clarification. Are we talking about a team that has members that are on-site and some of the members are remote, or full on-site and full off-site team? So let's just talk about all of them. If I have the combo team where some of the people are and some of the people are not, this one is a super hard space for me. And let me go ahead and say, my first thing is to take it to my group and let them figure it out. Here's what I've seen be successful in different places, especially when I have large chunks of the team in both places. Maybe there's somebody that is playing the host for them, like is constantly there to be mindful and listening to them, so that we're not in a space where everybody is kind of dropping the ball when it comes to the remote group. Or maybe everybody plays as if they are remote, but I think that that one I've seen that one work, but I always have personally felt a struggle with it because I'm like, man, we got all this cool stuff here and we can't use it in the same way, but they find a way around that. And then if everybody is remote, then I think that one puts level playing field. The asynchronous thing is not a must be, but the drive-bys aren't as crazy. I think of using the Pomodoro technique is a good one in this space. If you've never heard of it before, Pomodoro means tomato, and for some reason that means take a break. Like 25 minutes of focused work and then 5 minutes of break, and then you just do these things in cycles. Go check it out, it's pretty cool. But maybe it's bigger chunks that we let people go do this work in. I can't tell you how long you need to focus on complex work. But the group should decide what that looks like, even if they're in person. Now, something that I may do as a Scrum Master is make the rest of my organization, or at least the layer around the team, aware of, hey, this is kind of how we're working, and we are trying to do this experiment and give them this space to have focus and do their work. And so maybe that's a way to go and touch that.
Awesome. So we got a question that is kind of around team building, new teams versus long-term teams. Do you schedule team building opportunities? How often, how big or small? So for recognition as well as building trust and teamwork.
Okay. This is one that, for me at least, I don't believe it's changed from the virtual world to from real to the virtual world. I separate out performance-based recognition from just, hey, we're awesome, we're still all here, and so we're all here, so let's celebrate us. And I do that on a regular. Me personally, as a Scrum Master, I believe my success does not exist in a vacuum, and it is not because of me. It is because of the awesome people who I've worked with. My success is theirs. My family knows that my success is based on those people. We set aside time and space, and I'm talking about me, my family, my leaders in my organization, set aside time and space just to celebrate the team, period, done. I don't associate that with any Scrum event because it's not. It's just stuff that we do, and do it at what frequency makes sense for you. I do find ways to try to find what our team dynamics are. Is it Taco Tuesday? Is it we go to get coffee at about 10 a.m. all together? In our particular Dallas office, I got to tell you, the UX team kind of owns coffee. That's their thing. And they are all there together. There's a cold brew at certain times. Because I've kind of insinuated myself with them in a few different ways, I can get some of that cool coffee that they drink because that's what they do, and that's a hallmark of who they are. And so that type of stuff, I think, is what you start to build upon. But maybe that is something that you just turn virtual. And when somebody does something amazing, do you get one of those free accounts where you send them a little card and it's the dancing elves or whatever the case may be? I mean, there's something about that, those little bitty things. I got to show you. This is a mail that I got from a coworker just a few days ago. Like, this is like somebody put pen on paper and sent that to me. a coworker, like this is it. That's that kind of stuff. So how does that work with each group? And I think you find those spaces. Now, if it's about we do well, then make the performance stuff based on the value that the team creates and that they have the ability to impact. But don't make it on like progress stuff. We did X number of points or something like that, then you're going to get a lot of what you ask for. And since the team controls what size those things are, they just make them big. Go for hundreds of millions, guys. That's how you get all the points. So that's the kind of space that I would get into with those.
Awesome. So I got a couple of other questions here before we get to kind of wrap it up. And I know you hit on a number of the things that you're seeing that are remote tools. And the question is kind of around that, like what are some of the things that you're seeing teams use to incorporate into this remote world that they're having success with, or that you guys have seen that you like yourselves?
Okay, that's a really big question. One of the things that when it comes to remote tools, I'll talk about a few of the ones that I end up using. I end up using Trello because it's simple. So when I need to do something that's really simple, maybe it's me and a few people, we just throw it in Trello. Most organizations have a product that is Teams or is like Teams. It has a lot of these functions in it. And so we might end up using its tools to keep and hold things and like actually use it at the team becomes the team, our stuff becomes the stuff inside the team. And so that might be something that we use. And some of it may be transient. I struggle with the different types of data that we want to hold. There's transient data, like to me, texts, they're here and they're gone, and I don't care about them for later on. But there's some things where I want to hold them and keep them. I want them to be reference materials. And there's some where I'm going to be updating them all the time. And man, some of the places where we start to use them as reference materials, if we're not going to stay diligent to that, now it becomes waste and it becomes noisy. And like I really struggle with like which tools to use in which of these spaces. So if things can be transient, I let them be. I try to reduce the number of tools that I'm using to the bare minimum. I tend to use Miro just because it's cool and easy to use as a whiteboard, and I think of it as a whiteboard. So when I'm done with the whiteboard, I erase it. If I want to keep something, I print the PDF and I put it into a storage place. And so I start leveraging those things. Having singular locations that multiple people can touch when they need to is really important. So if you weren't using your remote drives and tools like that, now all of a sudden they became really important. Having good organization around that is pretty important. Your analytical friends and your administrative, cool, smart friends around that maybe can help you build a really good structure around those kind of things. I found myself using using these tools for other spaces too. I use Miro when I'm doing interviews because it's a virtual whiteboard. I would go and do interviews on a whiteboard collaboratively with another Scrum Master anyway. Why not do it in that space? And so that's been a tool that's helped me in that space. I use Zoom because it has breakout rooms. I use Teams because that's where teams are located and file shares exist there, and it has a lot of integrations with other tools. In things, some things are lightweight, some things are heavier. I have an account on everything, so I don't have to make it hard for me to go get into it when somebody needs me to. I use Google stuff because there's a lot of companies who are switching to using Google tools. Like, I think you got to have all this stuff just so you have access to it, and go learn it if nothing else.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm. All right, this is going to be our last question time. Cool. And I think it's more of a, they're looking for, what are some books to go seek out that you like? And then also, is there anything right now that you are just into that's a book?
Okay. My books that I like are, I gotta say my favorite ones are The Lean Startup. I just dig it because I've been more into my product owner space. And then almost anything by Strategizer has been really nice. Business Model Generation, Value Proposition Canvas, those are really cool. This is Lean has been one that I needed because it was it explained it so simply. And there's a video about this. There's a video about Lean Startup on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. This was one that explained Lean so simply to me that I really dug it. The one that I purchased recently, and this is the one I just started talking about because one of my friends from Switzerland gave me this as a concept to start talking about, is 10 types of innovation. She was I'm getting more and more into UX, and this is one that she gave me as a nice UX book. So I haven't cracked this one. It just arrived yesterday, and I'm starting it tomorrow. So that's what I'm into right now, and I love it. Now, this conversation doesn't have to stop here. If you want to get in touch with me, I am on linkedin.com/Ty Crockett, and I am easy to connect with. I accept all invitations unless you seem to be trying to sell me something that I can't buy. So video games are welcome.
Awesome. Well, hey, I wanted to thank everybody for attending today's session. And Ty, as always, thank you for sharing. We value everybody's continuous improvement and everybody's feedback. So if you could please complete the survey, go to sketch.com, log into where your schedules are, find the button that says feedback survey, click on it, give us your feedback. Also, the recording for this session will be available tomorrow. Kind of the same thing, just log into Sketch. As soon as you log in, if you go to this particular talk schedule, there'll be a button that says live stream. We hope you guys enjoy the rest of the virtual Agile Shift and have a wonderful day. And again, Ty, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.